Let's take a look at some of the oldest Snow Peak products ever produced. The story starts with Mount Tanegawa, just on the border of Niigata and Gunma Prefecture in Japan. Yukio Yamai was a prolific mountain climber, spending most of his weekends and time scaling the mountain. We'll skip over most of the story. A lot of that can be found on Snow Peak's website if you want to learn more. Mount Tanegawa is a complicated mountain to climb. It's one of the 100 famous mountains in Japan. With so many deaths taking place due to rock climbing, it's sometimes called the Mountain of Death. In order to aid his mountain climbing pursuits, Yukio Yamai starts contacting local metalsmiths in his hometown of Niigata, Japan. The first products he makes are pythons, small pieces of metal that get wedged into the rock to help you descend safely. We can tell that these are old in a number of ways. First and foremost, each one's rather different. Logo placements are off or misstamped. Grinding marks are different. Sizes are different. Each one is truly unique and one of a kind, even if they're unused, like these here. After working with pythons and finding a lot of success with the Snow Peak brand, Yukio moved on to crampons. Some of the earliest crampons that Snow Peak ever produced and branded are seen right here. We can tell this because of the black finish and some of the logo markings. Additionally, just like the pythons, there's hand grinding marks, imperfections in the metal forging process, and overall, a relatively crude construction, especially compared with modern crampons. We can see a similar set here. These are the same model of crampons overall. The set is new old stock with a price tag from a company that's still around today. We can tell that these are newer in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, on the back, there's a crossbar, whereas the original model would have had a chain. There's also no forward stabilizing bar. Additionally, the logo is in slightly different places, with the black being on the right side of the crampon and the orange being on the left. Finally, the finishing overall is just a little bit nicer and more modern. There's stainless steel hardware, the grinding is a bit cleaner, and the casting marks aren't as prevalent. With full underfoot crampons out of the way, some of the next products made were these smaller crampons. Sitting in the arch of your foot, they would simply add a little bit extra traction when needed. This is also one of the first pieces to use the full, circled, trademark Snow Peak logo from the 1960s. Most of the other products that we've seen so far only leverage the cursive word mark. These also have a patent number on them, which is another first. One of the questions that we're asked here a lot with our archive is about packaging. Frustratingly, the packaging in these early products is pretty bland, as you can see here. It has an interesting design, almost an animal skin texture with this yellow and gray graphic on it. But other than that, it's a very simple cardboard box, stapled together, white underside, colored topside. But you can see this is exactly the type of packaging that would have been offered for this style of crampon. The set is from the early 1980s. We can tell that because of the logo differences. Snow Peak used this all-capital Wardmark logo up until about 1985. This means that if Snow Peak was still using this generic packaging even as late as the early 80s, that original packaging for 1960s products as we're showing here today is going to be incredibly difficult to find and authenticate. We can see more of this generic packaging with this portable chair right here. Same all caps logo, but very interesting iconography. Looks nothing like a cohesive brand that Snow Peak would implement starting in 1985. There's different fonts, odd color choices, cartoon graphics, as well as a photograph of the product itself, which is relatively generic. This is likely just a white label product. In fact, you can still buy very similar chairs from other brands today. Going back to our X-Mod crampons and taking a look at Mount Tanigawa as well as some of the other accessories that might be needed, you're then going to evolve into creating pieces for your crampons. We had a quick shot of this earlier, but it's the packaging for replacement crampon bands. It features the Mount Tanigawa graphic in the background, as well as the trademark logo in the top left corner. Using this logo, we can date this from about 1963 to 1968. The colors and graphics used on it aren't necessarily seen in a lot of other places, but thankfully, the Snow Peak logo is pretty prevalent. Carrying cases were a staple of Snow Peak crampons for decades. This one, from the late 1960s, is made out of wax canvas. It features tie ropes that would loop around to keep your crampon secure, as well as additional padding on the inside to prevent from pokes and holes due to the spikes on the crampons themselves. We can tell that it's old due to this logo. This logo would have been used in the 1970s as well, the italicized all capital Snow Peak. Because this is listed as a Yamai product instead of a Yamaco product, we know that it predates 1968. It's hard to tell exactly when, where, and why each different logo was used, but thankfully, Snow Peak Japan has published guidelines on roughly when logos were implemented and deprecated. Another common tool that would have been used in mountain climbing were knives. Now, it's very unlikely that Snow Peak actually produced these knives themselves. Instead, they were most likely white label products produced by another company and had the Snow Peak logo applied. The knife itself doesn't have the Snow Peak logo on it, only the leather sheath. The brown is going to be earlier than the black. We don't know exactly when the transition took place, but it was likely in the late 1960s. We can tell that because the black is going to be a little bit lower quality. Both in the sheath and the knife. But another method we can use is to look at future products to create through lines in terms of design and materials used. We can see that on this hunting and sporting knife. The knife is actually nearly identical to this 1960s model. However, it uses black leather, cheaper metal, cheaper wood on the handle, and cheaper leather overall. This gives us a strong indication that the black knife came later than the brown. We can use a similar method of dating with our crampons. Here's the black model that we showed earlier. And here's the orange model that we showed earlier, again, with identical logos on different sides and a few slight feature changes. This crampon, though, is definitely newer. We can tell this in a number of ways. But first, let's look at the similarities. We have the same back arch, we have the same orange color, we have the same front crossbar, but the logo that's stamped into it is the 1980s logo, and the tag that's attached to it is also from the 1980s. So if we look at this, we can see that the black is the earliest, cursive logo, hand grinding marks. They cleaned it up and changed to an orange, and then kept that orange color all the way through to the 1990s until they actually reverted back to the black colorway. And with that, that's some of the oldest Snow Peak products that are branded and on the market. There are products that are likely older than this, however, they would have been sold under a generic label. Snow Peak didn't officially start until 1963, which means that from 1963 to 1968 was really about the oldest product you can buy. That's when we know that they were using the cursive Ford Mark logo, the trademark logo, and producing product exclusively for mountaineering. For our archive, This makes it incredibly easy to identify. However, getting any more specific, such as actual production years, production figures, and the like, is ultimately pretty impossible. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, Kurogi.co, where we have high-resolution photos and descriptions for all the products shown here today. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.